Before we get started with this episode, we wanted to provide you with a short update. Since we recorded the episode, the government has published a consultation setting out further detail on how the Fair Work Agency is expected to enforce statutory holiday pay from next year. The consultation confirms that the agency is expected to take a supportive approach, helping employers to comply wherever possible, but it also proposes that where concerns are identified, the agency will be able to look beyond an individual complaint and review holiday pay compliance across an employer's wider workforce. It also proposes a 6-year enforcement period for statutory holiday pay underpayments. This is significantly longer than the current 2-year rolling backstop for an unlawful deductions claim. The consultation has only just launched, so the detail may change, but these proposals reinforce the importance of employers reviewing their holiday pay arrangements and record keeping now. And with that said, let's get into the episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our VWV Workplace Compass podcast series and to this third and final episode in this collection that we've done on the Fair Work Agency. My name is Jess. I am joined once again by Kiki and Naseem, two partners in our employment team. And over the last 2 episodes, we've been looking at the Fair Work Agency. So we've looked at what it is, why it matters, and we've also talked about national minimum wage enforcement. And today we are going to look at holiday pay enforcement. And this is a new area for the agency and new duty that's been created on employers to keep records, which we'll come on to look at. And then we are also going to just conclude by thinking about where enforcement priorities might head in the future. So let's start then with the holiday pay topic. So, as I've said, it's a new area for the Fair Work Agency. And Kiki, would you like to take us through what's happening here?
Sure. So, holiday pay is one of the areas where the government is giving the Fair Work Agency new enforcement powers. Historically, if you were underpaid holiday pay by your employer, your only real option was to bring an employment tribunal claim yourself. The Fair Work Agency is going to change that. It will have the power to investigate holiday pay compliance and to take enforcement action directly using a similar model to national minimum wage enforcement.
Yeah. The strategic steer from the government says the agency should prepare to commence holiday pay enforcement in 2027. So we're not quite there yet, but employers should be preparing for this now.
Yeah, and importantly, it's worth just pointing out that there is already a new legal duty in place under the Employment Rights Act 2025. So, as of April this year, a new legal obligation was brought in for employers to keep reasonable records of annual leave and pay, which include things like holiday taken, holiday carried over, the details of holiday pay and any payments in lieu. And those records have to be retained for at least 6 years from the date they were made. So the expectation is that from next year, the Fair Work Agency is going to start enforcing that new duty.
That's right. And that means employers have an opportunity now to make sure their systems are correct and they're keeping the right records before that enforcement gets underway.
Yeah, absolutely. And Naseem, what do you think the challenging areas are going to be then for employers?
Well, I think it's important for employers to separate out the concepts of taking the actual holiday as leave and paying the correct amount of holiday pay. These are quite distinct requirements, and the new duty requires employers to keep reasonable records of both. As to what reasonable records would actually look like, there isn't any guidance as such as yet, so employers will need to consider this in their own individual circumstances. Records such as holiday booking systems, payroll records, and closure dates are all going to be relevant, I'd say.
Okay, well, let's talk now then about how the Fair Work Agency is approaching enforcement more generally and what can we take specifically from its first year priorities?
Well, the government strategic steer identifies 5 priorities for this transitional year, and that's reducing regulatory burdens, improving intelligence and data, raising public awareness, providing thought leadership and preparing for full operational capacity from 2027. So there's a real emphasis on building the foundations for a more effective enforcement system.
And what's interesting, I think, is the balance the government is trying to strike. So, on one hand, the agency is meant to be supportive of employers who want to comply. The steer talks about working with ACAS to improve guidance, using digital tools to reduce administrative burdens on employers, making it easier for businesses to understand their responsibilities. But on the other hand, there's an expectation of robust action against serious non-compliance.
And what can we glean about the holiday pay enforcement point specifically, given that it's a new area? Are there any further clues that we can pick up from all of this?
Well, I think we are likely to get more information in the coming months as the agency gets up and running. We know its budget explicitly includes funding for holiday pay enforcement functions, which the agency is due to commence in 2027. This will be a significant change as currently holiday pay disputes are primarily pursued through employment tribunals as unlawful deduction claims. Once the agency takes on this role, we may see more proactive state led enforcement, similar to the national minimum wage model, rather than relying solely on individual workers bringing claims.
Thanks, Nassim. Yeah, I agree. I think there's going to be definitely more information released on this in the coming months. So definitely something for employers to keep a close eye on. So let's then turn to the future of enforcement, if we can describe it in that way. So we know that the Fair Work Agency is very new, still in its first year. Where do we think enforcement priorities might head as it matures?
Well, the legislation allows the agency's remit to expand over time, and the government has already signalled that statutory sick pay enforcement is on the horizon. Beyond that, we think we might see more focus on sectors with persistent compliance issues. So, social care, agriculture, hospitality, the gig economy. And the Low Pay Commission's evidence suggests there are systemic problems in some of these sectors that individual enforcement hasn't been able to address.
Yeah, the intelligence led approach is also significant. The steer talks about the agency strengthening its understanding of compliance trends and emerging threats, improving data sharing, and using risk based targeting. So, over time, we'd expect the agency to become more sophisticated about identifying where problems are likely to be rather than simply responding to complaints.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also, what's interesting, I think, is where little references to the agency are cropping up in other places as other parts of the Employment Rights Act get closer to implementation. So there's a live consultation right now, isn't there, that gives us a glimpse of where the agency might be heading.
That's right. The government launched the consultation on 0 hours and low hours contracts in June, and it closes on the 25th of August this year. And what's particularly interesting from an enforcement perspective is that short notice shift cancellation payments will be enforced by the agency. So we're seeing the agency's remit expanding well beyond pay compliance into broader working time and scheduling issues. And the consultation also confirms that agency workers will be in scope for these rights, which adds a whole nother layer of complexity.
Yeah, indeed. And perhaps a topic for another day. So let's round up with some practical tips for employers then. And what should employers be prioritizing as we move through the second half of 2026 and beyond?
Okay, well, for me, firstly, audit your current compliance across both minimum wage and holiday pay. I'd say don't assume that because you haven't had problems before, you're compliant now. For minimum wage, look at calculations for salaried workers and those for variable hours. For holiday pay, check that you're including the right pay elements and keeping the right records.
Yes, I think that record keeping point is really key. On holiday, employers need to be thinking about what leave was taken, when it was taken, and what was paid for it. Do your systems capture this automatically, or do you need to think about building in new processes? For minimum wage, the same principle applies. Can you show accurate working hours, including overtime and training time?
Yeah. There's also an action around perhaps keeping informed of new priorities for the Fair Work Agency as it begins to establish itself. It is required to produce an enforcement strategy every 3 years, which should give insight into its priorities. Watch for the outcome of the 0 hours consultation in the autumn. I'd say also keep an eye on when holiday pay enforcement actually commences. We're expecting that to be in 2027. The detail will really matter. Remember that minimum wage rates change every April, and the rules around who qualifies for which rates are also evolving.
And finally, if you find a problem, act quickly. Self correction before an investigation starts is much better than being caught out. The incentive structure is designed to reward employers who get things right voluntarily.
So that brings us to the end of this series on the Fair Work Agency. Thank you both very much for joining me across the 3 episodes.
Well, thank you. It's been great to chat it through.
Yes, thanks, Jess, for having us. It's really been great. And thank you to all for listening.
Right. So, if on listening to our 3 episodes on the Fair Work Agency, you have got any questions about anything we've covered, please do get in touch with your usual VWV contact, as we've sort of really tried to emphasize during this series. Getting the detail right on things like national minimum wage and holiday pay compliance really does matter. If you would like more insights like this, please do like and subscribe to our podcast. You can also listen to all our previous episodes on the website, and you can also visit our Employment Rights Act pages for lots of articles, resources, our Employment Rights Act tracker, and all the latest updates. It is all available there, so please do bookmark it if you haven't already. Right, all that remains to say then is thanks again for listening, and see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.